Mm. Oh, after.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it. I was like, I
I
have
don't know.
my goofy stuff.
Let's do goofy stuff. Oh, and
Mm.
I just thought of another good topic. We're doing this
Oh,
live today,
a
literally.
premium account is required now to create
Oh
live
yeah,
broadcasts.
we found that out last week.
Okay. Well, I'll work on that. Okay. Goofy stuff. I was thinking about like picks and plugs. Um, w- James and I recorded a long time ago we need to do this episode. This was like one of the first ones where we did like desktop gear, which I don't know how much mine's changed, but I always love hearing that. Like what do people keep on their desks?
Yep.
What stuff?
I'm pretty simple right now, honestly. Oh, you know what though? I picked that trackpad a little bit ago, right? I settled on the
Magic
trackpad.
track, yeah.
I'm like, my hands, my fingers
Really?
are,
You get
yeah,
carpal tunnel?
a little bit. So I'm still in the market for like a good mouse that actually fits my
Yeah.
hand right, but still has like kind of all the qualities of a gaming mouse, like really high DPI, really good glide. And I
Huh.
haven't found it yet.
There, do you watch is it Marquez Brown?
MKBHD for
Yes,
sure.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So he had I think he picked this at one point. It's like this rubber thing that fits on top of a magic mouse. And he's like, "This is so dumb that I'm picking this."
You
But
just
it's
like
like,
3D print like the thing that goes on
well,
top of it.
it was like, the mouse is good, the shape
Yeah.
is terrible.
Yeah.
This solves all the problems.
Does
So
it does
you
it
could do
reroute
that.
the charging port to the to the
Oh,
front
I
or
know,
something?
right? No, it was just like I think it made it feel more ergonomic
Yeah,
or
yeah.
yeah, so you
What's up,
could
Jordan, in the chat? Jordan's name is gonna, come up today once we
Oh, good.
get
Jordan, I'm
recorded.
so glad you're here. You actually come and watch us and it's so painful. You actually talk to us while we're recording.
Me and Jordan are trying to
Uh,
coordinate going to the office at the same time because the Austin office for Atlassian is like it's kind of dead. Like there's not a ton of people in
oh,
there, I feel like. And so anytime I go to the office, I try to get good bang for my buck. I
yeah.
coordinate with all the people that I want to see.
Oh,
And
smart.
I was just pinging Jordan, like, are you gonna be in tomorrow? Because I kind of want to like go to the office.
Oh, nice. Okay. Oh, I got a pick for you. I know we're not doing picks and plugs. But we have had so much fun with this. So there is a custom GPT that you can get if you have I think you have to pay for Chat GPT in order to have access to this.
Hmm,
But
hmm.
it's called Cartoonize Cartoon Eyes Yourself. And you can upload who knows where these pictures are going.
Oh,
But you can upload a picture of yourself and it will turn it into a Pixar version of you.
that's awesome.
And so, my kids, we've been uploading pictures and things like that. And last night we were uploading group shots. We've uploaded our pets. It's so much fun. But the hilarious thing is just well, with my hair in the particular picture I uploaded it could not get my ethnicity correct. So, it kept it kept thinking that I
Uh,
was a black lady with I mean, beautiful hair, but I finally had to tell it I'm a very white woman, and then
what did it? Okay, there you go.
it did
Yeah,
get it right once I said I was white, but it's funny, it's changed my hair totally when
yeah,
I did that,
that's
but,
weird.
like, Henry had, like, a group shot of, like, him and, like, maybe 4 other coworkers, and we uploaded that picture, and it did this one. It, like, put in, like, a ton of people in the picture, and it was like, "No."
That's funny.
Um,
Oh man. Yeah, I saw a new like Disney Pixar movie. I think it's Disney or Pixar. It's called Home. Kind of a cute movie with
what is
these
that?
little characters called the Boobs. The guy who
I
does
don't think I've
Sheldon
seen that
Cooper
one. Oh, yeah, I did see
that
that. That
he
one's a
he
fun one.
voices the main character.
That's a
Is it
old one,
old?
isn't it?
It's new
Yes.
to us, so
Oh, yeah. Do you see Inside Out too?
yep, good movie.
Well, so my daughter, she has blonde hair. I
Mhm.
uploaded her picture and she looks like Riley
Oh
is the
man.
one that
Yep.
it
Oh
did for
yeah.
her. But, man, shoot, that movie, like, made me cry.
It's a good one. I thought Anxiety was like a really perfect next character to
Oh, yeah.
introduce.
Oh, yeah. Well, and so my girls are 7 and 8, and it's also just already helped us have that conversation with them, be like, "This is anxiety right now,
Yeah,
and let's talk about it a little bit." Or, I've been thinking a lot with um in Inside Out 2, they have, like, these strings, and these are, like, core
the core
things that you tell
beliefs.
yourself, and so for them, sometimes I'll hear them say stuff, and I'm like, you're not gonna internalize that."
You're making the wrong string, the wrong core belief.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
I love seeing how Disney tries to put, like, a visual to such, like, a esoteric
Mhm,
thing.
mhm. Yeah, this is, like, definitely pre Inside Out too, but, like, Adele came home the other or last year, and she was like, "I'm not good at math." And I was like, "Uh-uh." Like, as a female and I hear all those statistics about math and science and STEM, and I'm like, "You're not gonna be that statistic." And I'm like, "No,
Yeah,
you're awesome at math, we just need to practice."
yeah.
And she had a phenomenal math teacher this year, and she, like, got to the point where she just absolutely loves math, and so it's like every time she would come home, I'd be like, "What was this you told me last year? Look, you are good at math," and just, like, trying to, instill that in her, but,
That
it's
that's
helping me
hard.
be intentional.
I
Mhm,
feel like my daughter's 7, and I feel like she's going through exactly those types of transitions where, like, she will get
mhm.
overwhelmed if we give her too many instructions at once,
Yep,
or if she struggles with something, that positive self-talk is the first thing that goes
mhm.
away, and so, like, how do we make sure that those are at the forefront of, like, what we're teaching her so she
Yep,
doesn't slip down that slope?
yep. Well, yeah,
Parenting is
and
hard, man.
oh, man. But the thing that gets me is, like, well, just Adele in particular, and I think this is just because she's the older out of the 2 girls, is that when she starts to internalize things, she almost gets irrational about stuff.
Oh,
So
interesting.
and it's hard to have a conversation when she's irrational, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm trying to use logic here," and it's out the window.
Okay. Okay, so Jordan's
Oh, yeah. Number
Jordan's
block
kid's a
is
genius, apparently.
fantastic.
Okay, just putting us all to shame over here.
Times tables it forward. That's amazing.
That's a really
That's
cool.
that's
Yeah,
funny.
that's a good example of, like, using, technology to actually enhance, your child's intelligence and
Mhm.
stuff like that. Because so often iPads are for entertainment and not for
Yep.
education.
Yep. Um, I don't know if this is helpful, Jordan, but, Adele, so I know I'm talking a lot about her. She latched onto the Homer app, and we paid for that, and she taught herself how to read, which, I mean, she went to kindergarten knowing how to read, and Henry and I are like,
Whoa.
"We did nothing, I promise." But it was just that app, taught her everything. So check that out. Or if you're like me and you're trying to hook your kids on coding, Code Spark is also really good, and it turns things up or turns things into games. So like it makes my heart so happy when like Isaac's like, I think I need a for loop, mom. And I'm like, yes, you
Whoa.
do.
How old's Isaac?
So he just turned 10,
Okay.
and he's really got that was actually a couple years ago. So, like, some of the games with, Code Spark are you say you have a queue of people and you're at a restaurant and you have to serve them orders. So, basically, you set up a for loop to handle all their orders, and then within the for loop, you'll set up conditionals. Do they want this? And if they do, give them this. And so it's just teaching them that logic piece of coding, and there's also another game where you're trying to throw, I think, snowballs at like the other person. And so you program it. You say, right, jump, and then throw. And so then the other person might program in something, and then you have to play your program to see if you actually hit them with your snowball. So again, it's just teaching those logic things. He's also recently gotten into Scratch. I've kind of held off on that one a little bit because with Scratch, you can share your games with other people online, and that's always to me a risk.
Yeah.
So we've tried to be really careful about the online play or sharing. But in terms of again, just that, like, logic aspect of it. What's interesting with Scratch is you can set up, like, instances to say, like, "I want this instance of," say, like, an elephant to do this thing. So, it's a little bit more in-depth programming, but I think
Yeah.
that's done by MIT, maybe.
We introduced one to our 5-year-old, who, like, he does like logic and technology.
Uh-huh.
Um And so it's like these pieces that you kind of rotate and put together. So it'll be like it'll have like a number, like a 1 or a 2 or a 3, and that's how many spaces you advance. And then they have the notion of like looping or repeating.
Nice.
So you hook together, and the iPad has like the camera's like looking down at them, and
Oh,
then
cool.
on the iPad screen, you're like moving a character across a
Nice. Is
course.
that Osmo? Is it the
That sounds familiar. I can't remember what it's called.
Okay, because we have an Osmo and you can get, like, different games for it, but we haven't done any of the coding
Mm.
stuff. It's like, there's, like, a find and seek one that we have and another one that's, like, dress a character or something like that. Cool s Okay, well, we can actually
Yeah, let's hit it.
Jordan, I was gonna say, it looks like you might be the only viewer, which is totally fine. This episode might be all over the place. It's it's gonna be that water cooler talk, but, there are a few things that I'm really excited to talk about. Okay, so I'll do the intro. Let me pull up the music. Where did it go? Oh, did we lose it? Oh, there it is. This always hold on. Okay, even better. Okay. This is what happens when I've been gone for a week. Okay. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about some technical things. We have all kinds of topics planned, from the Laravel JavaScript saga continuing to private companies versus public companies. It's going to be a fun one.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton, and I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood JS core team.
Hey, y'all, my name is Brad Garapi. I'm a full stack developer at Atlassian working on Confluence.
And today we are sponsored by WorkOS. If you haven't heard of them, they are a fantastic company. I've been so impressed with them. So if you are building a SaaS application and need authentication or authorization, WorkOS has you covered. So it will provide you with that login screen, the forgot password flow, sign up flow. You can do Google Auth, Microsoft identity, all the things built in. So you don't have to take care of all those logic flows. You don't have to worry about security. It will do all that for you. Not only that, but you can use their hosted authentication, or you can use your own custom UI, hooking into their SDK. So I've been experimenting with the Astro project with WorkOS and have been amazed by how easy it is to set up and to customize. So check that out at WorkOS. And specifically, if you want to check out authkit.com, that includes their hosted solution and their SDK. So
I
thank
love
you.
I love projects like that.
Mhm.
They let you come in at any level.
Yeah, well, and I mean, for me, it's like, okay, if I'm trying to move fast, I can just use their hosted solution. And as a designer, I'm like, if I have a login screen that this is what I want it to look like,
Yeah.
I don't want it to be branded. Nobody has to be the wiser. It's lovely. And the fact that you can swap those out based on how your application grows.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks WorkOS for sponsoring. Okay, Brad, happy birthday.
Yeah, it's coming up. I got what, 4 days. 4
Okay.
days. It's coming up. But it's been a banger week, I gotta say. I'm crushing features at work, and
Awesome.
actually myself and Jordan kind of worked together to kind of get myself a little bit of a birthday present.
Oh,
I don't know if you heard, but Century was doing this big giveaway on
uh-huh.
Twitter where they were
Okay.
like slowly working up to like some grand prizes, and they were like dropping little codes around. So
Uh-huh.
like some creators would put out codes, or they'd hide codes in their website. And the final prizes were a custom branded PS5 and a custom branded PS5 controller.
What?
And
Did you win?
wound up getting both of them. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Brett, that's just like, well, we were at that conference and you won a watch.
Yeah, I am never lucky, but, like, over the past year or 2, I've been kind of lucky.
You
Here,
know
I'll
what? I think some of
put up the
it
tweet so
is
you can
oh,
see.
man. I think some of it is just, playing. You know, a lot of people, it's like, "Well, I don't win, so I don't put my name in." And it's like, "Well, of course you're never gonna win if you don't ever put your name in." So,
Yeah, what is it? What's that phrase about luck? You grow your own luck, you
yeah.
create your own luck. It's like that. You just keep your ears open, you know,
I can
listen to the community, yeah.
that kid that made the announcement at that conference, I can still hear his little voice in my head being like, "Brad Garapi," and just, like, it didn't even register. I think I was
I
sitting
took a
next to you,
picture
and it
with
was
him, yeah.
you. I didn't
Yeah,
even know it was you just because he mispronounced your name. It's
yeah.
like, Garapi.
Yeah, so instead of, like, uh, picks for this episode, I actually need recommendations for PlayStation games. This is the first time I've owned a
Oh,
PlayStation since
yeah,
PS2, so, like,
okay.
I need to know what to play.
I was trying to think. We have a PS4. I think that's
Mhm.
right. And there were certain games that came out at the time that were only PS4. And I'm not sure if that was oh shoot. Isn't there like Tomb Raider? Henry really likes those. I think those might
Okay,
be
yeah.
specific to the PS4 stuff. And then he usually gets the Harry Potter and the Star Wars games.
Yeah, there's a new Star Wars game coming out that I'm pretty excited about, and I'm glad that I have a
Yeah.
system to play it on. Um, this fall is gonna be lots of games. I told myself I was gonna read books this year. Yeah, right, like, all I've been doing is playing games.
That's so funny. Well, I think it was the PS4. It was either that or the Xbox. I had taken a nap one afternoon. It was like a Sunday afternoon, and I woke up. I think my kids were maybe at my parents'. I'm trying to remember why they were not present. But anyways, I woke up from the nap, and Henry was like, "So I had to go buy this PS4," and I was like, "What?" But then the new game had just gotten released, and we had talked about it, but it was just kind of funny the way that he said it was like, "So I had to buy
I
this
had yeah.
thing."
Well, it's like, look, now I got a PlayStation. I have to go
Mhm.
buy games.
Yeah, yeah. I'll try and figure out what some of those are that
There you
he
go.
enjoys playing.
I think the ones I'm thinking about, like, I need, like a classic release title for PS5, so
Oh,
Spider-Man
yeah.
came out, like, I think
Oh,
right
yeah.
when PlayStation
Those
5
we do
came
have
out.
those.
I gotta get that one. God of War is also, like, a big PlayStation exclusive that I feel like
Uh-huh.
I have to play. Other than that, I missed out on Red Dead Redemption, like a really good Rockstar game. Um, I have to see that one because I love Rockstar games, and then
Okay.
I don't know, whatever else comes. People are recommending a bunch of different stuff, that I'm not sure is up my alley, like, Elden Ring is not my thing.
Uh, I'm always like just like the Mario, very simple, Crash
Yeah.
Bandicoot, that's me. Just
Yeah. I like
mindless.
I like those games nowadays because, like, I don't have the mental capacity to, like, get involved in this big, gigantic world of a game that takes hours and hours to figure
Yeah.
out. Like, I really need jump in, jump out, quick and easy stuff.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah,
That's
heck of a
awesome.
birthday week.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. Okay, where do you wanna go from here?
Um, I kinda wanna do the next one. Have you been on Twitter lately? Like, what are your thoughts about tech Twitter recently? Like, we had the
Um,
the really cool all the conversations about Laravel and SQLite,
yep.
and I feel like recently it's been kinda dead. Like,
Yes.
nobody's talking about a lot of stuff.
Well,
What's going on? It feels empty.
um, and I don't necessarily don't necessarily wanna go down this road, but, most of my media consumption lately has been political just
Yep,
because of all the turmoil that's been going
yep.
on recently, so I don't feel like I've been quite as in tune to the tech space as I have, recently with all the, like, Laravel JavaScript drama.
Yeah, yeah, and I've noticed that too, like, tweets from accounts who are usually talking about web dev are
Uh-huh.
now talking about politics. So I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, maybe I'm taking a step back from Twitter because it's not necessarily something I wanna get, fire hosed right at me
Yeah.
every time I log on."
Yeah, well, and that's really why I left Facebook, like 8, 12 years ago, was because I was just like, I don't wanna read this
Yeah,
from other people. I don't wanna get into it. So,
yeah.
anyways, for whatever reason, it's a little bit different when it's strangers or acquaintances.
Yeah, like, Twitter, I feel like it's just, like, mostly quote unquote "strangers" on the internet. But Facebook, it's like people I know, and I'm like, I don't yeah, this just feels
Yes.
like it's gonna make a rift between us if we wind
Yes.
up, like,
Yeah.
getting into it."
Yeah, like, I'd just rather not know. Yeah, so a lot of the stuff I've been listening to lately has been more news driven or, like we were talking about political, but if people have recommendations for that, I'm definitely open. I'm trying to keep a broader view there just because I don't wanna have that echo chamber
Yeah.
or be just listen to things that I mean, that's what an echo chamber is, but just listen to things that reinforce my perspective. I'd rather have a broader mindset, even if it's something I don't wanna hear.
Honestly, the
Uh,
only thing I feel like I've heard tech-wise on Twitter, I've heard a lot about local first lately.
oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, yeah, just
Interesting.
like data lives in the browser and then gets synced
Hmm,
in kinda like a background process out to your database, out to your source of truth. So, it's always fast, it's always resilient to network changes.
mhm,
Um, and then there's just like
interesting.
so much complexity in like the sync layer and how you handle
Yeah,
conflicts and things like that.
interesting. Yeah, there's work, I think, with, one of the database solutions on that. Um,
Oh, yeah?
yeah, I can't remember what it is. So when I was at Zeal, there were 2 co-founders that were actively present. So there were 2 silent partners that had kinda moved on, but, one of the partners now is working with a nonprofit, and I can't remember what it's called, that's embarrassing, but what they do is really interesting. They're focused on literacy in elementary schools, but specifically I mean, they cover quite the range in literacy in, like, say, kindergarten through 5th grade. But they also really try and focus on that before 2nd grade because they're like, if you can help somebody learn how to read before they enter 2nd grade, it drastically changes the trajectory of their life. Not just from an educational standpoint, but also from like a socioeconomic standpoint,
Hmm,
which is really fascinating. But he was talking to me about a project and potentially if they could build it on Redwood. But one of their use cases was really interesting because he was saying that like they have grants and things to be able to build games and products on school computers, but they don't necessarily have the bandwidth or the reliability in the network
right,
to be able to connect all the time. And
right.
so they were really looking for a local first thing, or even when it is able to connect to the network, being able to sync in an efficient manner.
Yeah,
So what you're saying really does resonate, especially with that business case.
yeah, and it's wild. It's one of those things where, it's a new space and there's tons of libraries coming out, and I
Mm,
just listened to the syntax episode where Scott was just naming library after library, and he's like, "Yeah, it's just it depends on what level you wanna jump in at. You can jump in at the
mm,
level that does everything for you, and then there's, like, every small subdivision of that where you're piecing together every little
hmm,
bit," and he's like, "It was hard to make sense of," he was saying. That's what it sounds
interesting.
like.
Yeah, interesting. Very cool. Yeah, I did get accepted into 2.5 conferences.
And a half? Okay.
Yeah, so, I got accepted to Connect Tech, which is in Atlanta in
Mhm.
November, and then also got accepted into Momentum. You met Michael Richardson at that conference 2 years ago, so he's one of
Yes.
the organizers for that. It's outside of Cincinnati. So that one's in October, and what's interesting is I will actually be giving the same talk at both of those. It is a JavaScript cage match. So I'll be talking about all the different frameworks that I've been building things in and really what taking one project and building it on each framework and talking about the learnings and talk about Sentry again, using them as a benchmarking tool. So it's not just
Oh,
my own
nice.
personal preferences. It's not just my DX and the things like that, but using their tools to say, okay, what are we talking about in terms of speed and errors and efficiency and stuff like that. So pretty cool. And then the
You need to
half.
do yeah, I
Oh,
want you to do, like, a podcast episode where
oh
you
yeah.
basically just give your talk, and I get to sit there and, like, ask
Okay.
questions and, like,
Yeah.
hear it live.
Yes.
That
Yes. Poke
great
holes in
dry
it.
run opportunity, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I also have the domain comparingframeworks.com. So once
Nice.
that project goes live, it'll go there. And hopefully I'll have a lot of educational material around that. But I'm working with Century on that project. So shout out
That's
to
awesome.
them. And then the half is GraphQL Summit or GraphQL Conf. They're
Mm,
both around the same time. I think I spoke at Summit last year, and so they reached out to me to speak at that conference again. And so I'm going back and forth with them on the topic. So we'll see if I end up speaking there or not.
Is GraphQL something you use often nowadays?
I use it if I'm working a Laravel project. I mean, sorry, not Laravel,
Redwood?
Redwood project,
Yeah.
yep. Which okay, so I do wanna talk about this. We'll use this as kind
Let's
of a
go. Let's
segue.
go.
So a few weeks ago, we had this JavaScript, Laravel saga conversation. We had Aaron Francis on, which is a phenomenal interview, talking about full stack JavaScript versus Laravel. And there's quite a few things that I learned. So I've gotten to the point where I realized if I really want to understand and know a framework, then I have to build something on it, because you can do demo apps and things like that. But until you say, okay, I'm going to build something on it, I'm going to spend the time to build a project, you don't totally know it. And so I have this gigantic project that's a side project that I've been working on. I started building on Remix. I got a little frustrated with it on Remix.
Okay.
So we can talk about that. I'm wearing
Sure.
my Remix shirt today. So let me just
No hate, all love. It's all good.
I am a fan of Remix. Actually, we've talked about the biggest gotcha for me. And then and you have ways of working around that. So I do want to throw that caveat on there. So then I moved it over to Redwood, and I loved working on this project in Redwood. And some of it's just because it is my day job. I'm very familiar with Redwood.
Yeah.
And it just felt so good to be like, I work on this as my day job, and I do honestly love it. And it was great. And I hit a few walls that made it hard. And it's not Redwood problems, it's like JavaScript problems.
Mm.
And we can talk about those. And so then everybody started arguing about this Laravel versus full stack JavaScript. I'm like, okay, if we're going to talk about Laravel, let me see exactly what I'm up against if we're trying to build this full stack JavaScript thing. What is so great about Laravel? And so I ported the project over to Laravel. And at first I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, because all the things that were hard were now easy.
On the
And
back end.
so on the back end.
Yeah.
And so I didn't do anything on the front end in this
Yeah.
project, because I was like, I've already done all this work on the front end. The back end is the hard part. Let me see how easy it is to solve it. So I got all the back end stuff working. And then I got ready to build the front end. And my specialty is front end. I was like, this is going to be easy peasy. It has been the most frustrating part of the entire project. And I'm like, this is why people want, like, say, JavaScript or a single language front to back. And I totally understand where the struggle is. So let me talk about a few things, and please interrupt me and ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first thing that I came up against was mental models. And I'm not sure this would have been as much of a hurdle if I was coming at it from, say, Vue or Alpine is the main JavaScript framework that Laravel
Right.
uses. So
Right.
I think Vue follows a similar mental model. But with Alpine, you get a lot of these nice syntactically simple things for doing transitions or being able to toggle pieces on and off. I mean, that's what a lot of the UI in JavaScript does. You can do the animations really easily. So in that regard, it kind of felt like Svelte. But where it became difficult was if I do have to pass state back and forth. It
Yeah.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And I realized, finally I asked ChatGPT, I said, how do I'm coming at this from a React standpoint. I'm trying to learn Alpine. What are some of the mental models that are different? And that question unlocked the next level for me, because it was basically like Alpine is event driven. So if you are familiar with vanilla JavaScript, and again, I think Vue does this, but anytime, say, you click a button, you're going to emit or dispatch an event to get handled. And so then it becomes a little complicated, because you have to make sure that as it bubbles up, you're listening on the right layer, and
Yeah.
that the right instance hears it and not a different instance. And you stop propagation and you catch it and do something with it.
Yeah. I guess like I would like relate this to React by saying, like, imagine you didn't have use state or props,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
the only thing you had was use effects.
Yep.
And then then in the use effects, you're just YOLO modifying DOM elements and stuff. Like that's what an event system is. It's everything is a side effect. So there is no
Mhm.
source of truth. You just get the event notification and you run down that path and do everything that needs to get done. Because
Yep.
you can look at it like that too, because like you're just sitting on the page in most websites, nothing changes until the user does something,
Right.
And so truly every interaction is an event that causes, cascading ripples across what's going on. But
Right.
you don't have a source of truth. That's why people called jQuery code like spaghetti code,
Mhm.
because it was just, I don't know, I'm just mutating stuff. There's no source of truth. So it got weird.
Yeah, and that's exactly how my code started to feel, was spaghetti
Yeah.
code. So with Alpine, this is interesting. If you have a div and you want to add state, you put
Mm,
a attribute on there that's called x dash data, and
yeah,
then in quotes, you have your curly brackets, and then it almost looks like a JavaScript object.
sure.
And so you could have multiple X data attributes up the tree. And so some of that starts to feel a little bit like spaghetti because it's like, oh goodness, where where does this X data attribute live? And it
Right.
has to have an X data attribute in order for it to be seen as an Alpine component. So
Does
you
it
can have that anywhere in a Blade component. So Blade is Laravel's front end templating language.
does it react when that data changes?
Yes, it
Okay.
does, but you cannot pass it around like a prop. It
Right.
was very finicky about passing it in and out. And this was some of the other weird pieces that I got in terms of, again, working from PHP to JavaScript, is you have a Blade component that is using PHP. So you could have you can have a Blade component that runs PHP in the component. So the PHP is going to run first, and then it's going to run all your templating stuff. So you have to think in terms of, okay, is this PHP? I'm going to transfer this to Blade. So that's their PHP templating. And then you're like, okay, I have a Blade variable. So that's PHP that's coming from the server. That's going to get rendered first. And I'm going to hand that off to JavaScript. And so that with PHP or with their Blade variables is usually double curly brackets. And then you have a
Mm.
$sign and then whatever the variable name is. So sometimes I would get mixed up with, okay, how many sets of curly brackets do I need? Where
And then
is
it's
this
like
variable coming from?
then you're, like, putting Alpine code in there too, and now all of a sudden you've got, like, 4 different languages,
Yep.
let's say Blade, PHP, Alpine, JavaScript, all trying
Livewire.
Livewire, all
Li
trying to touch this thing,
Yep.
and your brain just it goes spaghetti code, like, in your
Yes.
mental model too, like, then React comes along and just says, "Oh, we're just JavaScript," and so I feel like that's how they won the hearts and minds of the front end
Yes.
developers by
Yes.
doing that. It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we just don't have the silver bullet yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least we're
So
understanding the problems better.
right. So let me throw in the Livewire piece of it. Livewire is, I think it's the same creator that created Alpine, created Livewire. And when you're writing Livewire code, it almost looks like PHP. It's a little bit different than what we think of as traditional. Well, I say traditional JavaScript. What we think of in React components, because React has become more functional
Mhm.
programming. Whereas when you're talking about PHP and Livewire, it's all class-based components. So it looks more like the class. But what happens with Livewire is you are updating things and it all looks like PHP, but under the hood, they have Ajax happening to be able to sync that with the database. So it starts to feel like, if you have to think of it in terms of JavaScript lingo, RSC, because you have a server component that can update all of the stuff on your database. Now, where I've run into issues is it's not reactive like you would think a reactive component is, because that's JavaScript. And
Mhm.
so again, trying to keep all these things in sync is not fun. So, okay, let me go on to the next pain point with Laravel. It's like, how much time do we have? Okay. So, hosting. This is something that I've totally taken for granted in the JavaScript ecosystem, and a lot of it is thanks to the work of Vercel and Netlify. So, if you're going to host something on Vercel or Netlify, usually you can just say, "Hey, here's my GitHub repo," and then it's able to look, I guess, at your package.json file and figure out what library you have running, generally what build commands you're going to need, and it can figure all that stuff out for you. There's not much you need to do. Uh, Generally, the most I have to change is my environmental variables if I want to set the database to be something like a production server or something like that. But it's incredibly simple. That's all. It just works. Laravel does have Laravel Forge, which does make things easier. But what's interesting about Forge is it's not a server. So all it's doing is it's setting up the server for you. So if you're using, say, DigitalOcean or AWS or anything like that, you hand Forge your API keys, and then Forge will
Oh,
go in and do all the settings for you. So it's
well,
not handling hosting, it's just
that's
managing.
that's actually kind of nice because it allows you to host on the bare bones serverless stuff
Yep.
because that's half the problem with Vercel is like, oh, we're scaling a lot. We want to drop down to host on AWS instead, and it becomes very difficult. So like,
Yep.
I guess Laravel Forge is like the SST for Laravel apps. SST being the
I
thing
was
that
like, "What is
makes
STD?"
SST is the thing that DAX works on. It's like this
Oh,
command line for easily deploying stuff to
yep.
AWS essentially, but
Yeah,
they're just
yeah,
more
that's what I
focused on
was thinking.
JavaScript stuff.
Or, I'd also put it, for making comparisons like flight control.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
Where flight control handles all your AWS stuff. You just give flight control your whatever pieces you need. So Laravel Forge does that for you. And there are parts of it that are nice. It's like, yeah, here's my repo. You already know I'm doing a Laravel project. You can set all those things up for you. But I ran into a few issues where the easiest way to get started on a Laravel project is to use SQLite. And so when we had our conversation with Aaron Francis, he was like, I love SQLite. And I was like, great, I'll just stick with this being SQLite. This is wonderful. Well, Forge does not support SQLite, which I think is really interesting that it's like you
That's
provide this out of the box, but it's not supported
well,
like
that kind of makes
locally.
sense, right? If it's a serverless function, SQLite's not gonna cut it,
Mm,
right? That's gonna spin up and spin down, and you're gonna lose the contents of
yeah,
your
that
on disk database.
yeah, but it's not so like I don't think you have to be Vapor, I think, is their serverless solution. So I think it's all server full is what the with the Laravel stuff.
Oh, Forge's server full? Oh, okay,
Mhm.
so it could be managing
Mhm.
EC2 instances on AWS. I went right to,
Oh, yeah,
Lambdas for some
yeah.
reason. Yeah.
So,
Okay. That's weird.
yeah, so anyways, I moved everything over to MySQL, had to get that set up locally. And
Mm.
the reason I got set up locally was trying to have insight into errors. It was so hard. Like it's going to just be easier if I can do this on my own machine, figure this
Yeah.
out and redeploy. And MySQL is more uh like more what's the word more strict about the order that you build things out and how you set up your relationships. So there's actually quite a bit of work that went into migrating it surprisingly from SQLite to MySQL. So that was fun. And then there's also Envoyer. So Envoyer is another paid Laravel service that you can tack on, and Envoyer is really focused on zero downtime. S I think that's how
Oh,
that
okay,
works.
sure, like the instant deployments and
Yep, yep,
rollbacks. So what, everything's
yep.
containerized and you're just
That's right.
pointing it to the running thing? Yeah.
That's right. So if you were to update your code, what it does is it will redeploy a new project, and then it will change the pointer
Yeah.
or the symlink to once everything is updated to go to the new version. So if you are on the site at that time, it's really going to be a second change versus the entire site's down for 5 minutes while we rebuild everything.
Yeah. Is it I mean, it's not like a symlink. They're not pointing to a different part in the
Oh,
file system of the
I don't know what
EC2
the
node. It
technical.
normally it's DNS. It
Okay.
so like you've got a DNS name, like like a C name or an A record or something that just says, okay, you were here, now you go here, and it's two running
Yeah.
containers running the same app, or
Yeah, I'm not
one's the
sure
updated
what the
version.
technical is. I do know if you log into the server, there's like a current folder, and then there's like a
Interesting.
different
There's
a version
probably
of
a
the
way to
folder.
do it where you're actually pointing at a folder structure almost, and it
Mhm.
brings another one up where it
Yeah,
does
so
it based
I'm
on like the file system level instead
okay,
of the domain level.
okay. So, anyways, there's the I'm not like I said, I'm not sure about the technical aspect of it, but what's interesting, I just didn't feel like the documentation was super straightforward. It's like when you go into Envoyer, it's like, "Oh, yeah, connect it to one of your Forge projects." I'm like, "Yes, please." And then you click on it, it's like, "Go read the documentation." It's
Yeah.
like, "Wait, that's your project. Like, you should know. Like, I should just be able to say, like, here's my credentials even. Like, go
Yeah.
log into my Forge project and just grab what you need." But
Are
trying
they
to set up
all
all the
Are they all,
So
like, different credentials? Like, do you have credentials for Envoy and Forge and all these
yes.
different things?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, and
Hmm.
DigitalOcean, and it's all run through API keys, which I guess might be helpful if you had, say, a Forge or a Forge account that is running on DigitalOcean, it's running on AWS, like, you can set up multiple servers and
Sure.
multiple sites, so maybe that makes sense from the server standpoint, but at least when I'm talking about going from Forge to Envoyer, I mean, maybe you have people that have multiple Forge or Envoyer accounts if you're dealing with clients, I don't know, but I'm just like, consolidate everything.
Yeah. I think I think maybe the silver bullet here, and I'm just gonna throw out a guess, 'cause I'm also looking at, like, your list here, the Laravel, the easy parts.
Uh-huh.
You have stuff like image manipulation, generating PDFs, generating QR codes, making APIs.
Yeah.
Somebody just needs to make a Hano server that with really good generators for, let's say, API layer stuff that includes documentation and that has some of this stuff built in. But the kicker there, like the main, like, and you could run a headless API essentially,
Mhm.
and then connect that to your front end that works just the way you want it to. The main kicker here, though, is that we need like a type safe network layer. So, like, whatever project handles all this backend stuff needs to
Mhm.
generate types on the front end. And of
Mhm.
course, now we're we're getting involved with the database piece. You have to have a database piece hooked up to know that as well.
Yeah.
Um, but it almost seems like it comes down to opinions because writing those. I mean, I guess Laravel does it in the adapter style, but writing those adapters for everything would be so different. Like if you take a look at Prisma right now,
Mhm.
if you switch a database type from SQLite to MySQL, half of your schema might break because there's unsupported data types in there.
Yep. Yep.
So even if you did do this adapter pattern, I think that makes sense that they wrote their own ORM because then it's generic enough to handle any of these supported databases. And so if we're going to do this in the JavaScript world, we'll need an ORM that maybe works on an adapter style model, and then we could fully connect the database to the ORM to the API and kick out generated types, which I think is what you really need. But you're still running two projects, kind of.
Yeah. So I think Prisma has a lot to offer.
Yeah,
And we had Mark Hess on the show from Prisma talking about things, and it was mostly just Brad and I gushing over it.
yeah.
But the nice thing about Prisma is you have a Prisma schema file where you list out your entire schema. And
Or
then
multiple schema files. They
yeah,
just
that's
released
true.
that feature.
That's true. So then you can run in the command line a migration. So if you're not familiar with that language, what that does is it usually creates like a database entry or a text file to say, hey, this is where we are. This is what we've pushed to the server. This is the current state of things. And so then if you make any changes to the Prisma file, then the migration will go to see, okay, what updates need to be made. And it'll handle all that SQL code for you. In some ways, I feel like that's the silver bullet, and the reason that I like that setup is because I can look at my schema file and it's the source of truth. It's exactly how I want my database to look. I just look at that single file and I know this is how everything works within the database. It sets up all the relationships for me. I don't have to worry about ordering. I can define types right there and it handles it for me. Whereas like with Laravel, you actually write the migration file to your database. So you're manipulating it in those files. And so if I want to go in and see the changes that have been made to the database or like what some of those fields are, I have
Yeah,
to go dig through individual migration files. Now,
yeah,
granted, I could pull up the database. You can do that. You can also do that with Prisma. But the fact is, if you're going to look within your code, within your source control code, you have to dig through multiple files within Laravel, where it's like Prisma just gives me this everything I need right
yeah.
there. So
One day. One day.
yeah. So, anyways, the image manipulation, the PDFs, the QR codes, all that stuff. It'll be interesting to see how the JavaScript world evolves around those hard pieces. Another thing is this project that I'm working on is like really dependent on sending out lots of emails, and so there needs to be queues for that, and jobs and cron jobs, and all that stuff is really easy within Laravel because you're doing all that stuff in the server. Whereas JavaScript, if you're in a serverless environment, there's no telling how long you have to run that function.
Yeah.
And you have services like ingest that will queue all that up for you. But then you start getting into this really weird thing where you're having to tack on like 5 different services to do something that Laravel does out of the box.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious as people lean more into RSC, or like with Redwood, we're leaning more into the server full environment, how all those hard parts suddenly become easier because you're not dependent on the time it takes to run those functions.
And what's going to get even better here is that with build systems like Vite, you can kind of throw in plugins that
Mhm.
can change your build output. So, like, instead of just having one whole node application that is, let's say, your Remix server and all your backend stuff, you can actually like spin off different parts of it into little serverless functions. So this is the email service, and this is the this portion, and they can still talk to each other. And I think that is where your deployment flexibility and your environment flexibility is gonna like greatly expand when you have
Yeah.
these pluggable build tools that you can adapt to how you're trying to deploy. Because you
Yeah.
might not want one node server, you might
Mhm.
just want to be able to spread the load.
Yeah. I did wanna come full circle and just say what was difficult about Remix. I think I may have mentioned this on a previous episode, but just in case people are wondering, and we can also offer Brad's solution. This won't take but a minute. There are tons of routes in this particular project I'm working on, so my routes file looks ridiculous. The routes folder. So within Remix, you have a folder for every single route, and that folder name contains layout information. And it just became so cumbersome trying to keep track of everything. Um, Brad's told me before I need to check out the config file, which is the route setup that Redwood uses, and I think that would resolve that problem.
Yeah, and the remix team is actively like in talks on how to improve this whole thing because it seems like everybody has a different opinion on how they want it, but nobody's happy with the current situation. So,
Yeah.
they're going to be doing something with routing config at some point in the future to make it nicer.
Yeah, and even if you're coming at it from Epic Stack, which is Kent's solution or starter kit for using a Remix project, if you look at his route structure, he has underscore folder name. Inside the routes folder, he's using, I think, a library
Yes.
to be able to say, like, have underscore app, and there's an app layout. And
Yeah.
then you have, say, underscore marketing, and that's the rest of your marketing template. So that if I had implemented a solution like that, that would have also made things a lot easier.
Yeah, that little plugin library thing is pretty nice. It
Mhm.
instead of having you fully qualify the whole route name and with all the layout stuff in the directory name or in the file name, it allows you to nest and it looks up the tree to like
Mhm.
assemble that.
Yep. The other thing that I had trouble with Remix is I just felt like some of my loaders were becoming very fat, trying to load all of that information. And so then my file just got incredibly long. Brad's told me, because I was asking him about it, just to stick everything in like libraries and separate functions and then to
Mhm.
import those. So I
Yeah,
think that would have made a difference.
that's the way I like to do it. Is like your loader should call like a couple functions and then hand that to the JSON response. Like I don't like to put all that kind of business logic in there.
Yep.
Um, and I guess that's like your I I never remember MVC. That's your
Oh,
controller
controller.
or
Yep.
yeah, your controller layer. And so
Yeah.
like try to keep it thin, move your business logic out, then it makes it really easy to mock it as well. So like when you're trying to test these
Mm,
loaders, if you
nice.
can just mock your individual like calls
Yep.
that say get posts or something, and then it allows you to just mock out a function call instead of like all the logic that you were trying to put inside
Yep.
the loader.
And I think that would probably also make it just easier to reuse in general. If you had another
Yes.
page that needs a similar data, you just import that function instead of having to rewrite that.
One of the weirdest things about Remix is that you can like use loaders from like parent pages or other views. It's really interesting. Um, and I never knew whether to like use loader data in a nested view or like pass it down as props
Oh,
because
yeah.
it creates an implicit connection with like a child or nested component
Yeah.
or a nested route with a parent route. And I asked some of the remix folks, and everybody was like, kind of do whatever feels right to you.
Hmm.
But if you want to be safe, don't make those implicit connections. Pass
Yeah.
that data down. Don't call the hooks.
Yeah. So that's one thing that Redwood does is they have a concept of a cell, and so you do all of
Mm.
your data loading through this cell, and so as long as you're
Mhm.
passing a cell around it, you can drop that anywhere,
Oh,
which is kinda nice that just the fetching logic lives right there almost with the component.
yeah.
Um, so but I do like that idea of what you're talking about is just putting those in that simpleton singleton pattern where
Yeah.
you're stick all that in separate functions.
I guess talking about complex technical things, have you ever worked with OAuth? And do you think that's something that sounds
Mm.
scary?
Yes and yes.
Yeah?
So, the main thing that I used with OAuth was the badge app that I did for the Redwood conference,
Mhm.
last September. It is using the GitHub OAuth stuff,
Okay.
and Rob Cameron, who's a core team member, wrote a fantastic guide that's on the Redwood docs on how to use it. So, it was actually really simple. I was really scared to use it, but it was very simple. Things like Work OS make it super easy because it's just like, "Hey, switch on this button and we'll give you a Google button."
Yeah.
But I've never aside from just following Rob's tutorial, I've never handwritten that.
Yeah. I recently like got moved over to a new team in Atlassian and they asked me to do OAuth. They were like, hey, we need somebody to come in and do this. And it wasn't like roll our own OAuth. It was like log in with like a different OAuth provider, essentially. Um and like I was like, okay, this is gonna be hard. Like I've never done this
Mhm.
before. And then once I kind of figured it out, it's really not that bad. You
Mhm.
basically register your service.
Yep.
This is with Notion. You register your
Okay.
service with Notion, and then when somebody comes in to authenticate, you just hit a URL that Notion provides. Like you redirect the user to that URL. Notion gives you the whole UI that allows you to pick what spaces you want to share and permissions and stuff. So Notion provides that, which is really the hard part.
Mhm.
And then when you press OK, they redirect you back to, like, a webhook, essentially.
Mhm.
Think about it like
Mhm.
a webhook callback.
Yep.
And they hand you a code, and then your webhook takes the code, a couple secret credentials that you defined in your integration, and you exchange the code for an OAuth access token. That's it.
Mhm.
And then the next hardest part is now that you have this OAuth access token, you're still kind of living in that separate little OAuth pop-up window. You have to
Mhm.
send that data back to your front end somehow.
Mhm.
And then you use a post message, window.post message or window.opener.post message. And it's a way to communicate between two browser
Oh,
windows,
interesting.
like cross domain, and you'd send the data back. And so, really, the whole thing was just like redirect to a Notion page, make one API call to the Notion API, and then communicate back via a post message your OAuth access token. And then your front
Mm.
end can go do whatever it wants.
The Work OS auth kit stuff almost works the exact same way,
Mhm.
except when you are able to authenticate, it will send you back with your basic information about your user. So
Yes.
when you hit the callback endpoint on your application that you specify whatever that is, then you can say, okay, I want to save this user's information into my database. And these are the credentials I want to
Oh,
save on my end. So
cool.
that's, I mean, also, I say that loosely because you don't wanna do too much syncing between your database and their database,
Right.
and they also give you calls within their SDK to say, "Hey, grab the first name from the information we have stored on our end."
Yeah, same thing. Like once you get your access token back, it comes with the associated like owner or user, and then you
Mhm.
choose to do what you do.
Yep. Emilite in the chat was asking about Clerk. I've tried to use it. I just don't this is gonna be unpopular opinion. I don't feel like their documentation was quite that easy, especially if you're not working with a Next project. They really specialize in Next. And so if you're not using their SDK and the pieces that they give you, also when you talk about custom UI, you have to use their hosted solution unless that's changed. And so it's going to say clerk all over it,
Oh, I
which
think it is changing.
it,
I think they just came out with like clerk
okay.
elements recently.
Yeah. So, but we do have a good friend, Brian Morrison works there and loves it. So,
Yeah, I felt whether it was clerk or next off, any auth package that integrated with Next.js, I didn't love because
Mhm.
there was constantly you're like wrapping the routes with auth or like
Mhm.
that would be like a with auth before you exported
Mhm.
stuff. And it just felt like in order to guard everywhere, you kind of had to like put these 50 wrappers in all these different little locations. Whereas like I'll go back to Remix. You go to your loader, you stick whatever guard function you want
Yep.
right in your loader, like done. And when Remix gets middleware, it's game over, right? Like you just stick it in your middleware as a layer and done.
Yeah.
And so
So
I
some of
just
that
thought that like Next in general was hard to integrate with.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of it might be, I haven't tried to use Clerk since they have RSC and SSR because there is a middleware element with that,
Cool.
with Next, and then Astro does have middleware. So when it's talking about Work OS, you are protecting things with their middleware layer.
Cool. Yeah. I still feel like we have a lot to go through.
Mm.
What interests you? What do you want to
What's
talk about?
well, let me see. Some of the stuff, agile process, let's save that to another time. I stuck that on there. And then I would say I have planned projects. We can stick that with the agile process stuff whenever we decide to talk about that.
Yeah. What about this stuff?
Yeah. How long do you want to talk about that? Since we're nearing the end.
We're coming up. Okay, then let's talk about ESLint V8. How about
Okay.
that? Has your Dependabot or Renovate bot popped up and said your ESLint's out of
Oh,
date by a
man.
major version?
We have Renovate Bot on Redwood stuff, and it is
Uh-huh.
my nemesis. Uh, I'm gonna be honest, I don't completely understand how all that stuff works. It's
Oh,
like I know in general how it does, but it is so confusing to me.
it's a pain in the butt. Like, yeah, I don't love how it like syncs with your pull requests, but it just like
Maybe explain to people that have not used it how all that works.
okay, so if you've got a Bitbucket repo or a GitHub repo and you authorize these bots in your repo, what they do is they take a look at the latest commit on your main branch, let's say, and they essentially run npm update or npm outdated to see what is not up to date. And based on how you configure the bot, it will suggest pull requests or create pull requests for you based on rules of what's outdated. So you can say renovate bot only make pull requests to update things that are out of date by a major version or a minor version or a patch version, whatever. And then include these packages based on a regex or exclude these other packages based on a regex. So there's lots of ways to configure it. But the idea is your repo gets pull requests created automatically to update your dependencies so that you don't have to go in and do this manually. There's 1,000 other problems with this, like authenticating to like Artifactory or like local mirrors of NPM, right? Because big companies don't want to be hitting NPM all the time. Like NPM actually said, please use mirrors if you can, because we're getting hammered by like every big company in the world. Um, so you want to like be able to point renovate bot or dependabot at your local mirrors, and that's like a problem. If you have like parameters that you pass into your install commands or your update commands, like the force flag or the legacy pure depths flags, they don't handle that stuff very well either. But okay, at the end of the day, they suggested this ESLint V8 update to me, and I kept trying to do it both at work and on all my personal projects, and it just ain't gonna work because the TypeScript ESLint parser has not been updated to support ESLint V8. Huge problem, right? Like TypeScript ESLint parser, which is probably what everybody's using to parse it
Mhm.
because you're writing in TypeScript, doesn't support ESLint V8. And ESLint V8 essentially one of the bigger changes in it was there was like a change to the configuration file structure to make it way easier to export and share and inherit configurations. I wrote some weird crap to do my shared configurations, and now it's like export an object. Like it's really easy.
Interesting.
But I just saw a tweet. TypeScript ESLint parser is targeting July 31st to release their V8 support. And so, boom, we're all going to be unlocked to update V8. So you could tell your managers if they're breathing down your neck for this, um, we can merge this PR after this date when all the dependencies are going to be ready to handle this.
I'll make sure that the Redwood team knows because we're trying to get a major out, and I know that would be helpful to include all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll be out of date if as soon as you publish,
Yep.
if that's the case. If you don't handle it, yeah.
Yeah, we have rate limiting on our Renovate bot so that it's not creating all these open PRs and, I don't know if it deploys an open PR to the server, so then we'd have like, if you have, 10 updates, it's gonna create 10 instances on different servers trying to check all the dependencies and things like that, so we have it running, like, 3 at a time, and then, of course, you could manually trigger additional ones, but automatically it only opens 3 at a time.
Yeah, if I could, like, snap my fingers and have the best config for that, I'd want pull requests for patch versions, all together. So, like,
Mhm.
just update every patch version, I don't know, every Monday. Heck, once a day, I don't care. Like, that stuff, I'm just gonna if the test pass, I'm gonna press go. Same thing with minors. Maybe once a week, show me the minors, and then majors, I think I want individual pull requests,
Mm,
like, once every other week, because half the time when you get that major, you have to go in and make some code changes and understand what's changing, and it most likely won't work right out of the gate. So,
yeah.
yeah, you can't get bombarded with those, and you need to handle them individually.
Well, and for us, it's like it might not affect Redwood framework code, but we have to be
Mhm.
able to communicate all of those changes to, like, our users to say, "Hey, if you're using this feature in your code, this is how this thing changes." And, like, that's one of the beauties of Redwood is it handles your updates for you, but it makes a lot of work for us.
Do you think that updating the major version of a dependency means bumping your major version?
Yeah, if it's
Yeah,
breaking.
if it's breaking, yeah.
If it's breaking. So, like,
If it changes your library code usage.
yep, yep, yep. Because I think that's how we handle it because, you mentioned Prisma multiple files. I think that was in a recent major, and so
Yeah, it
that's
is.
getting ready to go out on
Yeah.
our major, but I think it's if you're using it right now, it doesn't work, um, because that's breaking change it's breaking
Yeah.
change. I think that's the way we handle, like, some of the major libraries, like, we have Prisma is a major dependency for us, so it might not be as big of a deal if it's a smaller package.
Yep.
Cool, cool, cool. Do you wanna do picks and plugs or skip over? We're at time.
I mean, hey, I can just come out there and say, "Please recommend me PS5 games." That's my pick. It's your pick for me.
Oh, man. Yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Cool.
Tweet at us your best PS5 games.
And I think now I
Um,
have to plug Sentry because they were gracious enough to send me a PlayStation.
yeah, for sure. Well, and as I mentioned, they, are also working on that comparing frameworks project that'll be fun to talk about in the coming months. And also
Maybe
special
we should
thanks to
have somebody from
WorkOS.
Sentry on. I mean,
Yeah, I needed to follow up with Sarah. I'll get her on.
okay. All right, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and special thanks to WorkOS for also sponsoring. Got some good conversations in there about auth. So, but yeah, if you are listening after the fact in your podcatcher of choice, please leave a rating and review. That's how other people find the podcast. But for now, that's all we've got. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and end it. Thanks, Jordan and Amylite, also for hanging out in the chat. We like that a lot.